I think there's at least two ways of thinking about this. One is in terms of what that person is experiencing, and we can talk about that separately in terms of like, how might you know, separately from any other metric, that you're having metabolic dysfunction or blood sugar issues. But then there's this whole other world too of lab tests. And I think that there's been a lot of misconceptions about what those are. Most people on this in the conversation have probably had their fasting glucose tested, and probably also their hemoglobin A1C. I think those are the two most popular metrics used. But unfortunately, they don't give a full picture. And so understanding your metabolic health is like putting together all these pieces of a puzzle. So maybe we'll just talk about those two, and then I'll add in a couple others that I think are important to understand. So the first one is hemoglobin A1C, and that's really meant to be a reflection of your average glucose over the last 3 months or so. The challenge there is that, of course, you don't know what is happening within that big average. Like, how is it varying throughout the day? How high are your spikes? And there's actually situations that physicians have noticed where someone will have a normal hemoglobin A1C, but actually their blood sugar is high a lot of the time. It's just that their sugar, for example, is very low overnight. And so this is kind of the inherent flaws of an average, is you don't really know how you get to that average. So that's one important piece of the kind of blood testing world. And there also, there's some controversy about what is normal versus optimal. I think, traditionally, physicians will tell you that if your A1C is 5.6 or lower, that everything is totally fine. But a lot of metabolic health experts would say that actually that number should be closer to definitely less than 5.5 and maybe even less than 5.2. So there's certainly some kind of ambiguity around where we want to be there, but I would say that most of the kind of frontier science right now would suggest that the current standard is not actually optimal. The other piece is fasting glucose, and this one I think is so misunderstood. Oftentimes people will have a normal fasting glucose and they say, okay, then that means I'm totally fine. But the reality is that fasting glucose is a trailing indicator. So it's actually one of the last things to become abnormal when you have metabolic dysfunction. And the reason for that is a little bit complicated. We can get more into this later if people are interested, but essentially our body keeps our glucose in check through the release of a hormone called insulin. And so we will go to great lengths physiologically to keep our blood sugar in our fasting blood sugar in the healthy range. What fasting glucose doesn't reflect is how much insulin does your body have to produce to keep your blood sugar in that range. So like your blood sugar, your fasting glucose might be 90 and mine might be 90, but you're releasing 5 units of insulin to be there, and I'm releasing 50. And that fasting glucose doesn't show how hard our bodies are working to get there. And so you actually will have a normal fasting glucose for a very long time, even though your body's working really, really hard to keep it there. By the time your fasting glucose is out of range, that means that your body has lost the ability to, no matter how hard it works, to keep that normal. And that's actually a very advanced stage of metabolic dysfunction. So those are the two that I think are most common. The one that doesn't get tested enough that should is fasting insulin. And so that is, what is your insulin after a night of not eating? And that answers the question that I just posed, which is, how hard does your body have to work to keep your glucose in the normal range? And what you want to see there is a small amount of insulin, which means that your blood sugar is being regulated without a lot of effort from insulin. So I'll pause there, but those are 3 tests that I think we should all be tracking. And then there's many others that help to add additional pieces to the puzzle.